London, 1815. Beneath the chandeliers of Ashcombe House, the air shimmered with heat and gossip. Strings played a polished minuet, and the scent of lilies hung heavy as jewels and silk rustled through the ballroom. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe moved through the glittering throng with a composure learned over 5 years of quiet endurance. Her smile, polite, practiced, hid the exhaustion that comes from being watched, judged, and found wanting by a world that measured worth in heirs and alliances. Her husband, the Earl of Ashcombe, stood near the French doors, a man of marble composure and iron ambition. 20 years her senior, his manner toward her was neither cruel nor kind, merely indifferent. He believed affection was a distraction, sentiment a weakness unbecoming of his name. Tonight, his eyes followed her across the ballroom, not with fondness but with calculation, as though she were a chess piece placed correctly but capable of error. Eleanor's gown of pale blue satin shimmered like frost under the candlelight. She had chosen it carefully, the color of restraint. As she greeted the Duchess of Pembroke and endured another round of polite questions about her health, the familiar sting of pity brushed against her pride. "Still no little ones, Lady Ashcombe?" came the Duchess's syruped tone. "You are young yet, of course. The good Lord will bless you soon." Eleanor inclined her head, her lips forming the courteous smile society required. "Indeed, Your Grace. The Lord's timing is ever perfect." The Duchess's eyes softened with the smugness of one whose own nursery overflowed with sons. Eleanor turned away before her composure fractured. She had learned that pain, when hidden beneath grace, became invisible to everyone but oneself. Near the orchestra, 2 young debutantes whispered behind their fans. Eleanor caught fragments. "Poor Lady Ashcombe. Such a beauty, wasted on age. Perhaps God spares her motherhood out of mercy." The words sliced cleanly. She moved to the refreshment table, taking a glass of lemonade she did not taste. When she finally met her husband's gaze, she saw disapproval flicker. The Earl approached, his smile fixed for the watching eyes of peers. "My lady," he murmured, bowing slightly, "a word." They stepped aside, into the shadowed alcove of a marble pillar. His voice, though low, carried the weight of command. "You linger too long with the ladies. Attend to the guests of importance, the Duke of Pembroke, Lord Carroway. Appear occupied, not idle. The perception of our household must remain beyond reproach." Eleanor inclined her head. "As you wish, my lord." His eyes narrowed slightly, detecting the faint chill in her tone. "Your duties are simple. Fulfill them with dignity." With that, he turned and rejoined his circle of politicians, leaving her with the ache of words she could not say. Music swelled again, a new dance forming. Eleanor watched the couples take their places, laughter threading through the notes. Once, as a girl, she had dreamed of such nights, the swirl of gowns, the warmth of a partner's hand. Now, the waltz had become an exercise in loneliness, a theater of affection where she played the lead role in silence. Her gaze drifted toward the open balcony. Rain had begun to fall, soft as sighs against the stone balustrade. The scent of it, fresh, unsullied, beckoned her. Slipping through the crowd, she stepped outside, the cool air brushing her skin like mercy. The city stretched below, a sea of lanterns and carriage lamps shimmering through mist. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe without performance. Inside, the laughter continued, muffled and distant. Her gloved hands rested upon the railing, and she tilted her face toward the sky. Raindrops jeweled her lashes. In their cold touch, she found something startlingly close to tenderness. "Lady Ashcombe." The voice startled her. She turned swiftly, expecting her husband's reproach, but it was only Lord Pembroke's son, Charles, a harmless admirer, too young to be dangerous. "My lord," she said gently. "You looked quite alone," he offered, awkward but sincere. "I thought perhaps you had taken ill." "I am quite well, thank you." He hesitated, searching for charm and finding none. It must be difficult, these endless entertainments. The season grows tiresome even for the most enthusiastic. Eleanor allowed herself a small, melancholy smile. "Tedium is a luxury, my lord. Some of us are not permitted to feel it." The boy looked puzzled. She almost pitied him for his innocence. He bowed and retreated, leaving her once more to the rain. From within, a murmur rose, a ripple of laughter, then silence. She turned back toward the ballroom and froze. The Earl stood before the gathered company, expression hard. His voice cut through the air. "My wife appears to prefer the solitude of balconies to the company of our guests. Perhaps she finds her marriage insufficiently engaging." A soft gasp moved through the crowd like wind through reeds. Heat rushed to Eleanor's face. Every pair of eyes turned toward her, curious, delighted, predatory. She could neither move nor speak. In that cruel instant, she understood her husband's mastery. Humiliation delivered with civility, ensuring her guilt looked self-inflicted. She stepped forward, forcing her voice steady. "Forgive me, my lord." The air grew close. "I did not wish to faint among your guests." A ripple of polite laughter followed, too light, too sharp. The Earl inclined his head, victory gleaming faintly in his eyes. "Ever considerate," he said. "Now, shall we demonstrate harmony for our friends?" He offered his arm. She took it, because refusal would cost more than dignity. They moved through the dance with mechanical grace. His hand rested on hers as though she were a necessary prop. Each turn, each step, became a silent endurance of pride. When the final note faded, applause scattered like cold rain, and Eleanor's heart felt hollow as the applause itself. Later, when the guests departed and the chandeliers dimmed, she stood alone in the now silent hall. The scent of wax and roses clung to the air. Somewhere beyond the windows, thunder rolled over the city. She loosened the pearls at her throat, their clasp stiff with fatigue. From within her bodice, she drew out a small locket, its hinge slightly cracked, its miniature portrait faded. Her mother's eyes gazed up, kind and knowing, from another lifetime. "Forgive me," Eleanor whispered, "for the life I've allowed to shrink around me." A sound at the doorway made her start. A footman entered, bowing. "My lady, a carriage has just arrived." "His Grace, the Duke of Ravensshire." "The Duke?" she repeated softly. The name stirred faint recollection. A soldier turned recluse, a man whispered about but seldom seen. "At this hour?" "He begs forgiveness for his lateness, my lady." He was detained by the prince's envoy, but insisted on calling briefly to pay respects to Lord Ashcombe. Eleanor composed herself, slipping the locket back against her heart. "Very well. Inform my lord." As the servant departed, she turned toward the mirror beside the staircase. Her reflection met her gaze, a face pale from too many polite smiles, eyes too bright for indifference. For a fleeting moment, something within her stirred, curiosity, perhaps, or the faint pulse of hope she had long thought buried. From the hall came the sound of doors opening, voices exchanging formal greetings. And then she heard a new one, deep, deliberate, touched by quiet gravity. It was not the tone of courtly men or flatterers, but of someone who had looked into darkness and learned its patience. Eleanor did not yet see him, but the sound alone drew her still. The rain outside deepened, and lightning traced pale veins across the sky. Somewhere within that thunder, within that voice, the course of her life had already begun to shift, though she could not yet name why. 3 weeks passed before Lady Eleanor saw the Duke of Ravensshire again. London had shifted into the height of the season, each day a parade of carriages, salons, and soirees meant to polish reputations and disguise despair. The Duke's reappearance at these gatherings had unsettled society's rhythm. He was spoken of in half-whispers, a hero returned from war, wounded but unbroken, a man who had refused both royal patronage and marriage proposals from England's finest houses. No one knew the full truth of his exile, only that the battlefields of the continent had left their mark not merely upon his body but upon his soul. Eleanor first encountered him in daylight, beneath the great glass dome of the Royal Horticultural Exhibition. She had come at her husband's insistence, to display interest in charitable events that bolstered the family's public image. The Earl walked ahead, speaking with the prince's secretary, leaving her to trail behind among the manicured roses. The crowd was awash of silks and murmurs, the perfume of blossoms mingling with damp earth. It was there, beside a display of white roses, that a familiar voice broke through the hum. "You favor the Alba variety," said the Duke quietly. Eleanor turned. Ravensshire stood a few paces away, tall and austere in dark attire that made the silver at his temples gleam. His presence seemed to hush the air around them. "You remember their name," she replied, startled by her own calm. "I planted them once, long ago," he said. "They thrive in neglect, or so I've been told. Perhaps that is why I am drawn to them." His words carried an undercurrent she could not quite name. "They are elegant," she managed, "though their thorns are unkind." A faint smile touched his mouth. "As most beautiful things are." They stood in silence for a moment, the murmur of the crowd softening. Eleanor's husband called her name from across the hall, a sound more command than address. She inclined her head toward the Duke. "I should rejoin my party." He bent slightly in acknowledgement, his gaze unwavering. "Of course, Lady Ashcombe." As she turned to go, her glove slipped from her hand, falling among the petals. He stooped and retrieved it with deliberate grace. Their fingers brushed, an instant, a spark, before he placed it gently into her palm. "Forgive me," he said softly. "Some treasures are too delicate to be left in the dust." Eleanor's heart stilled. "You are kind, Your Grace." He bowed and stepped aside. She rejoined her husband, who noticed nothing beyond his own conversation. Yet as they departed, she felt the weight of that brief touch lingering, a warmth that refused to fade. The following morning, a small parcel arrived at Ashcombe House without a sender's name. Within it lay a single pressed white rose encased in silver filigree. Eleanor's breath caught. No note accompanied it, only the faint scent of rain and soil that seemed to whisper of memory. She hid the token within her writing desk, aware that discovery would mean ruin. Still, her hand trembled when she touched it, as though it pulsed faintly with life. Rumor, however, travels faster than secrecy. By week's end, whispers coiled through drawing-rooms that the Duke of Ravensshire had taken a peculiar interest in Lady Ashcombe. A coincidence of glances, an exchanged word, a shared preference for roses, each was inflated into scandal. The Tun, hungry for diversion, delighted in the notion of an untouchable beauty and a haunted soldier bound by forbidden sympathy. Eleanor pretended not to hear, but she sensed her husband's growing suspicion. The Prince Regent announced a grand ball at Carlton House, the crown jewel of the season. The Earl, eager to cement alliances, insisted they attend. "You will wear the pearls," he instructed. "We are to present unity." Eleanor obeyed, though her stomach knotted at the thought of another night under scrutiny. When their carriage drew up before the palace, light spilled across the cobblestones in golden rivers. Inside, 1,000 candles reflected upon mirrored walls, turning the air itself to liquid brilliance. The orchestra's opening strains floated above laughter and silk. The Duke was there. She saw him from across the room, conversing with Lord Pembroke yet apart from the crowd, as though invisible barriers surrounded him. His uniform was dark, unadorned save for a modest medal on his breast. When his gaze found hers, the noise of the ballroom seemed to dim. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture so subtle it could have been imagined. But she felt it, keenly, like a secret breathed between heartbeats. The prince, in jovial spirits, approached Eleanor's husband. "My dear Ashcombe, your lady looks particularly radiant this evening. I must claim her for a dance before the night wanes." The Earl could hardly refuse. Eleanor stepped into the center of the room, her body moving through the familiar steps of formality. The prince was gracious but ponderous, his words a blur of self-congratulation. Then, halfway through the waltz, he was called away by an equerry. Before Eleanor could retreat, another hand extended toward her. "May I?" The Duke's voice was low, steady, undeniably present. The musicians waited. Her hesitation lasted only a breath before she placed her hand in his. The crowd murmured, propriety rippled, but no one intervened. The dance resumed. He guided her with the precision of a man who had once known command. Their steps aligned effortlessly. Every turn drew them closer, yet they barely touched. "You court danger, Your Grace," she whispered. "I have courted death, my lady," he answered. "Danger feels almost merciful by comparison." She looked up, startled by the candor in his eyes. Beneath the candlelight they were not cold, as she had expected, but deeply alive, carrying shadows that spoke of pain and endurance. "Why do you speak to me thus?" she asked. "Because you listen," he said simply. "Few do." The waltz slowed. Around them, conversation faltered. His hand, steady at her waist, tightened just slightly. "My lady," he murmured, "there are wars far quieter, yet more perilous than any I have fought. And victories," she breathed, "more dangerous than survival." Their gaze held through the final note. When the music ceased, applause scattered like falling leaves. He bowed, she curtsied. The spell broke, but its echo remained. Across the room, a cluster of women whispered behind fans. One of them, a countess known for malice disguised as charity, noticed the faint outline of a white rose tucked within Eleanor's fan. Her smile curved like a blade. Before dawn, a letter would reach the Earl of Ashcombe's desk, unsigned but damning, hinting at impropriety and betrayal. Unaware of what awaited her, Eleanor left the ball in silence. The night air smelled of rain again. As she entered the carriage beside her husband, she felt the Duke's eyes upon her from the palace steps. He made no gesture, no farewell, only stood beneath the lantern light, the storm wind catching his coat. The carriage jolted forward, wheels striking the wet stones. Eleanor pressed her fingers to her fan, feeling the crushed rose within. It had begun to wilt, its fragrance mingling with the faint salt of tears she refused to shed. Across London, bells marked the hour. Each chime felt like a warning. She knew the boundary of what was proper had shifted, by a glance, a dance, a whisper, and that the life she had so carefully preserved now trembled upon the edge of ruin. Yet somewhere beneath the fear stirred something perilously close to hope, fragile as the petal of a dying flower, but alive nonetheless. Rain swept over London that night as if the heavens themselves sought to wash away sin. Within the carriage that bore her home, Lady Eleanor sat motionless beside her husband, her gloved hands clasped in her lap. The Earl's silence was colder than rage, his gaze fixed upon the darkness beyond the window. When they reached Ashcombe House, he departed without a word, leaving her to the echo of the storm and the knowledge that something irrevocable had shifted between them. Servants withdrew in uneasy quiet. The house seemed to hold its breath. In her chamber, Eleanor removed her jewels and laid them upon the dressing-table one by one, each drop of pearl and gold an emblem of a life performed, not lived. From her fan, she drew the withered white rose. It had browned at the edges, yet its faint scent still lingered, stubborn against decay. She pressed it between the pages of her prayer book, though she could not recall the last time she had prayed. At dawn, a letter arrived. No sender's name, but she knew the hand at once. The script was bold yet restrained, marked by the precision of a soldier. "If truth condemns me, let it be spoken beneath the same moon that first saw us." There was no signature, yet his presence breathed through every line. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with certainty. By evening, she would go. She waited until dusk before summoning her carriage. "A call to St. James's for a charitable visit," she told her maid, voice calm, hand steady. The lie slid easily from her tongue. Guilt no longer felt foreign. It had become a second skin. The road to Ravensmire House wound through the quieter quarters of London, past shuttered windows and rain-slicked cobblestones that gleamed beneath the lamplight. The Duke's residence stood apart from its neighbors, an austere mansion of grey stone, its gardens wild and unkempt. When the butler opened the door, he did not appear surprised. "His Grace awaits you, my lady," he said simply, and led her through a hall lined with portraits of ancestors in faded uniforms. The air smelled faintly of rain and roses. Eleanor entered the conservatory at the rear of the house. Glass panes rose high above, glistening with droplets, enclosing a small world of white blooms and green shadow. The Duke stood by the central fountain, its water whispering softly between them. He turned as she approached. "You came," he said quietly. "Should I not have?" Her voice trembled only slightly. "I feared you would not," he admitted. "That your good sense would save you from what your heart might regret." "My heart has regretted too little," she said. The words surprised her. They sounded stronger than she felt. He studied her for a long moment, the candlelight catching the faint scar along his cheek. "You risk much to stand here." "And you?" she asked. What do you risk, your grace? He smiled without mirth. Very little. Reputation is a luxury for men who still believe it matters. I have buried both friends and illusions on the same field. The fountain's rhythm filled the silence that followed. Eleanor stepped closer. They say you once loved a woman who died waiting for you. They say true enough, he replied. Her name was Margaret. She was kind, patient, and foolish enough to trust that war would spare what peace could not hold. And did you love her? With everything I understood love to be, he said. Until I met you, and realized I had known only the shadow of it. Her breath caught. You mistake pity for affection. Then allow me to prove you wrong, without touching you at all. His voice deepened, weighted with emotion. When I saw you that night, humiliated before those who pretend virtue, I felt anger unlike any I have known. And yet I could do nothing. You were bound by duty, I by silence. Tell me, my lady, what power holds greater cruelty than propriety itself? Tears pricked at her eyes, though she willed them back. Propriety is all that remains to a woman once dignity is taken. Then let me give you dignity, if only for an hour, he said. No vows, no oaths, only truth. Eleanor shook her head, struggling against the ache in her chest. Truth will destroy us both. Then let it, he answered simply. At least we will have lived honestly once. For a moment neither spoke. Rain pattered against the glass roof above them, soft as breath. She looked at him, this man marked by war, whose stillness felt like strength rather than indifference, and felt the brittle walls within her begin to crack. You have known death, she whispered. Do you not fear ruin? I fear only a life untouched by meaning, he said. And you, Eleanor Ashcombe, are meaning itself. Her name in his mouth was a benediction. The sound filled the room like light. Yet she turned away, hands trembling. If my husband knew I were here, he would call it treason of the heart, the Duke said. And perhaps he would be right. A sudden noise interrupted them, the creak of the outer door, the murmur of voices. The Duke's expression changed instantly, calm giving way to grim understanding. He has come. Eleanor's breath seized. My husband. Yes. The hour of truth is shorter than I hoped. The Earl of Ashcombe entered the conservatory a moment later, flanked by a single servant. His face was pale with fury, though his tone remained icily controlled. My lady. Your absence was easily traced. His gaze shifted to the Duke. And you, sir. How swift you are to repay hospitality with insult. The Duke bowed slightly. If my conduct offends, I will accept any censure you choose. But your lady is blameless. Blameless. The Earl's voice hardened. Do you imagine London will believe that? I do not answer to London, Ravenshire replied. Nor, perhaps, should you. Eleanor stepped between them. Enough, she said quietly. No good will come of anger. I came of my own will. Her husband regarded her with disbelief tinged by wounded pride. You disgrace the name I gave you. I have tried to honor it, she said. But names are cold comfort in a loveless house. The Duke's jaw tightened. My lord, I will leave England before dawn if that will preserve her peace. Only let her go without punishment. The Earl's gaze flicked between them, calculation returning where passion had raged. You will leave London tonight, he said to his wife. Ashcombe Manor awaits your solitude. You will not correspond, nor return. Eleanor inclined her head. As you command, my lord. Her composure startled even him. For a moment he hesitated, as though uncertain which of them held the greater power. Then he turned on his heel and left. When the door closed, silence fell like snowfall. Eleanor met the Duke's eyes. You should not have spoken for me. I could not help it, he said. Some wars are lost before they begin. She moved to him, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. Then let us not call this war. Let us call it remembrance. He took her hand, lifted it to his lips, and kissed it once, nothing more. The restraint hurt more deeply than desire. When she left Ravenshire's house, dawn had begun to pale the clouds. She did not look back. Weeks later, in her enforced solitude, a final letter arrived. It bore no address, only a seal marked with the Ravensshire crest. For one night, I remembered I was alive. For that mercy, I shall love you all my days. Eleanor folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the pressed rose. In the gardens of her exile, she planted white roses until the earth itself seemed to bloom with memory. Each petal whispered of what might have been, fragile, forbidden, eternal. And though history would never speak their names together, love had found its hour, brief as dawn, yet bright enough to outlast the dark.